There's literally a race going on behind me as I'm trying to film this. Hey, what's up everybody? Mitch here with Fit for Moto. Thanks for checking out another video. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the 3 most common mistakes I see beginners making when it comes to jumping. Let's talk about mistake number 1 that I see beginners make when it comes to jumping. And this really is a big one. So when I talk about positioning on the bike when you jump, it's really important that your body positioning is correct. And one of the most common things that I see is the knees breaking forward. What do I mean by that? Generally speaking, you want to keep your knees right above the foot pegs. Okay, so the only exception to that being if you're going to corner, obviously you sit in on the bike, hit your leg up high, and that's only for corners. So as opposed to when you're riding the bike, you really, if you're on the back of the bike, if you're sitting back, right, you still got your knee pretty much over top of the foot peg. If I'm gonna do some jumps or something, you've pretty much got your knee right over top of that foot peg. So one of the most common things that I see is the knees breaking forward. So you'll see the knees come forward like this, and that's particularly when people go off of a jump and they kind of go off and they go a little high like that. You'll see the knees break forward and their legs will open up and they kind of do this in the air, right? So they're gonna be right on the arches of their feet, which is wrong. You wanna be on the balls of your feet. They'll be on the arches of their feet and they'll go up into the air. Their knees will break forward and they'll open up their legs, and then they kind of do this like boner air thing. Super common mistake. So number 1, keep your knees above the foot pegs at all times. Like I said, the one exception is if you're gonna corner. Obviously you're gonna sit into the bike, get your leg up depending on which side you're gonna corner on. But apart from that, keep your knees right above the foot pegs. That's number 1. All right, mistake number 2 that I see beginners make when it comes to jumping is they chop the throttle. So a big mistake that people have when they go to do a jump is they think they're going fast enough and then they'll chop the throttle right when they're on the face of it, and that immediately loses drive off the face, and that's one of the last things that you want to do. If you lose drive off the face, the front end's going to drop down. You're going to try and compensate probably so you don't crash with poor body positioning. Really not a good way to go. So generally speaking, when you're hitting a jump on a motorcycle, you want to maintain a consistent throttle off the face of it. You can just keep the gas on, just kind of nice and steady. Even when you go off of it and the bike starts to rev a bit, that's okay. Then you can shut the gas off. But you want to maintain a smooth throttle on the face of it. A more advanced technique is, yeah, you've got a ton of speed, you're going to chop the throttle, you're going to scrub that jump, but that's more advanced than what I'm finding beginners are able to do, obviously. So chopping the throttle, definitely want to avoid doing that. You want to consistently and smoothly keep that gas on so that the chassis is not upset. Because like I said, if you're just on a consistent throttle off the face, the chassis will stay nice and level. If you hammer it, it's going to do this. It's going to drop the rear end, right? It's going to start to go Harley on you. The rear end's going to drop, and now you're going to be in this squatted position going off the face. You're probably going to do a boner air. That's dangerous. And if you chop the throttle, you're losing that forward momentum. So the front end is going to drop right on the face, that the suspension is going to compress, and then your back end is going to go way high. So if you throttle it too much or you chop the throttle, really bad when it comes to beginners doing jumps. Maintain a consistent throttle off the face of that thing. It'll shoot you to the moon nice and straight. All right, number 3. What's the 3rd thing that I usually see beginners doing when it comes to jumping that's maybe not optimal? Is body positioning. Now I touched on it with wanting to keep your knees right above the foot pegs, but there's more to body positioning than just having your knees above the foot pegs. When it comes to jumping, a lot of people either sit or they stand, obviously, but it's kind of, for beginners, it's 50-50. A lot of beginners feel more comfortable if they're sitting. That's obviously a problem because where they're sitting on the bike is usually completely wrong. So if you are going to sit on the face of a jump, I want you to sit right in that pocket of the bike, I call it, the pocket. So this is too far forward, right? And this is obviously too far back. You want to sit in the pocket of the bike. So if you look at my bike here, you'll see that I've got this step in the seat. This is the area that really you want to be sitting in. It's the pocket of the bike. That's if you choose to sit. Sitting off the face of a jump, generally speaking, is more of an advanced technique. So I would try and avoid that until you kind of pick up the skill level that will let you do that. But if you do, don't sit too far forward, don't sit too far back. You wanna sit right in the pocket of the seat. The other thing, if you're standing, that I see a lot of the times is, like I already mentioned, the knees breaking forward, right? So I see a lot of toes pointed out on the arches of the feet. That's obviously bad. What you want to be on the balls of your feet with your knees right over the foot pegs. And then I see people doing this, right? Or I see people doing this. Again, way too far forward or way too far back. Just as a follow-up to the throttle on the face of the jump, if you have a nice consistent throttle on the face, the chassis will shoot off straight. If the chassis shoots off straight, you want to maintain that center mass in the air on the jump. Now this is all, you know, you get into more advanced stuff if there's a kicker on the face or whatever, but just for the sake of beginners, if the chassis is nice and level, your weight should be nice and equal, if that makes sense. So if you're going off and you chop the throttle, you're gonna have to get your weight back because the bike's gonna want into it. If you go off and you hammer the gas, you're gonna need your weight way far forward because the front end's gonna come up. So if you find yourself doing either one of those things with your body positioning, that's probably why, is because you're not maintaining that consistent throttle up the face of the jump. So once you get that down, your body positioning on the jump, knees over pegs, you got your hips tucked a little bit, and you're just in that attack position like I harp on over and over and over. You're just doing this, and that's awesome. Now, the other thing with body positioning when you jump is when you land, obviously I see a lot of this where it's just like, and you're just letting the suspension do all of the work. One of the reasons that I harp on being on the balls of your feet is that when you land, your ankles are moving like a little suspension for you, right? So when you land, your ankles flex a little bit. They're acting as suspension, keeping your knees right over top of the foot pegs. Then you can sit down a little bit. Now your legs are doing a lot of the work for suspension too. So it's a lot softer. And if you land too hard, the bike will bounce and you're gonna bounce off of it, and then you're probably gonna do this, this, or this, and then crash, right? So it's super important that your body positioning is right and you're ready for that impact, and you're just using some suspension. That's all you're doing, using some suspension, a little bit of leg work. Bob's your uncle. Okay, so let's go over them really quick. Knees breaking forward, that's a super important one. Probably one of the most common things that I see. Throttle control, chopping the throttle or gassing it too much is number 2. You wanna learn just to be really consistent with the throttle off the face of a jump. And number 3, I'll call it the global body position on the bike. Really important. If you find yourself being too far forward, which and most often is too far back, that's probably because you're chopping the throttle on the face of the jump, so the back end is doing this on you, so you throw your weight back just because your body's trying to compensate and not crash. I hope that helps. Hit subscribe for me. I really appreciate you watching these videos. I really appreciate all my viewers, all the comments. You guys are awesome. I'm gonna go check out this race that's behind me, and we'll see you in the next one.